Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for coming to January Tell Talks. I'm going to give it another minute or two for folks to join us before we get started, and then we'll get into our introductions and setup for the day. We have quite a few people joining us. I'm excited to share about this topic today. And I also did allow folks to turn your camera on and unmute if you would like to, but I also know it's the lunch hour, which we purposely do this during the lunch hour, so you can listen and eat at the same time. So if you're off camera for that, that is absolutely understandable. I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen and get that piece set. All right. This is our first Tell Talk of 2026. Welcome in, everyone. Our Tell Talks are topics for early learning leaders, monthly webinars based on identified interests to facilitate solutions-focused discussions for questions in the early childhood field in Minnesota. They are done through our Child Care Aware of Minnesota Coordinating Office, which is located in St. Paul. Child Care Aware of Minnesota helps families find quality child care programs that best meets their family's needs. In addition, we provide support throughout the state for professional growth through child care providers through professional development, eager to learn programming, grants, regional grants, retain, teach scholarships, CDA scholarships, and awards. We coordinate Minnesota's QRIS system, Parent Aware. We also run the Eager to Learn online learning platform and help support some trainer and RBPD specialist support as well. And our goal is to keep Minnesota informed and community informed on the importance of early childhood education. Our Tell Talks facilitators today are myself, Heather Sharmoli. I'm the Director of Workforce and Professional Development at the Coordinating Office, and James Setta Diggs, our new Professional Development Systems Coordinator. Welcome, James Setta. It's our first Tell Talk today.
Thank you.
So as we have our guests go through the presentation today, I'll ask that you use the raise hand feature to ask questions or put them in the chat and I can raise a hand for you. And Lucy has offered to do some pauses and asking for questions throughout as well. The recordings for our events can be found on the Child Care Aware of Minnesota website after the event. And anytime you have suggestions for future topics, those are always welcome. Now, before I officially welcome Lucy, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can read the description that Lucy sent over. Lucy is the Early Education and Literacy Specialist at the Minnesota Department of Education. Today, she's going to share information on Cox Campus, an online learning platform dedicated to offering professional development for early childhood educators. So today we will learn about how the Cox Campus can support educator knowledge around emergent literacy and other crucial early learning topics. So I guess I didn't need to share my reading of the script for you all, but there it is. All right. Thank you so much. And I will hand it over to Lucy.
Super. I'm going to bring up my presentation now. There we go. I like to see people. So are you guys seeing presenter mode or are you seeing presentation mode?
We're seeing the presentation.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm here to talk, just like Ms. Shamoli shared, about a partnership for professional learning, Minnesota and Cox Campus. A little bit more about myself. I do hold the position of Early Education Language and Literacy Specialist at MDE. Just so you all know, I've been at this for a long time. I hate to say it, I'm approaching like almost 30 years of doing this work, and I've held every role like we all have. I've been a teacher, I've been a coach, I've been a director. I worked on a couple different research projects at the University of Minnesota. One looking at before we start saying executive function, we were studying early attention and memory skills, and then also Minnesota Early Literacy Training Project, which was where SEEDS was developed. So if anybody's familiar with the SEEDS of early literacy curriculum, I was at the university when that was developed. And before it rolled all across the state, it was a part of a research study that focused on programs in Minneapolis. I'm also a licensed ECFE teacher. And then I used to do a lot of training. I haven't in a number of years, but yeah, I used to do a lot of training out there for teachers, and I miss that. I miss that. That was always the best part was getting out and working with educators. So Cox Campus Partnership, I'm going to talk a little bit about why. I'm going to talk a little bit about learning to read. So it hasn't changed dramatically for the early learning community of what we know as best practices and things we should focus on and things like that compared to our K-12 partners. There's a big shift happening there, but always we're the foundation. And so where do we fit into that? I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about Cox Campus and some of the tools. Not only there is the asynchronous course, there's a mountain of resources built that go along each course that support implementation. And then I'll open it up for some closing and questions or comments from people. So here we go. So really kind of important fact is when they were getting ready to start implementing the READ Act, they really felt it was important to have an early learning person a part of the team. And that's me. I sit at MDE and I sit in the literacy unit and the early education unit. So we're not forgotten. I'm just going to put that there to you guys all. We're not forgotten. I'm a part of all the conversations. I really weigh in on how early learning fits into this. So in 2023, a big sweeping legislation was passed, and it's called the READ Act. And that's where all your K-5 partners and even 6-12 partners are going through a major training. So is to have every child in Minnesota reading at or above grade level every year, beginning in kindergarten. I have that bolded for us, and multilingual learners and students receiving special education services supported in achieving their individualized reading goals in order to meet grade level proficiency. I know that's a mouthful, but I think it's important to say beginning in kindergarten because we know it doesn't begin in kindergarten. We know all the skills that really that children develop happen from birth and even to an extent prenatally. We know healthy pregnancies matter too. All right, so here's a little bit of more of the why. So here's reading data, longitudinal data from 2013. But before I get into that, I really want to point out to the top bar on top. You'll see it's 95%. And science tells us when children receive effective instruction, supports, and preparation, 95% of all children can learn to read well. So when people are like, well, but, and what about this? Yes, and if children get the instruction, supports, and preparation, they can learn to read well. That is unequivocally the facts. But we know life and kids and schools and families and communities are more complicated than that. And guess what? This is where our reading scores are today. So you'll see that Magic Read Well by grade 3 is the very thickest. It kind of was plateaued, went up a little bit in 2015, and it's only been going downhill since. And that was even before COVID. So this isn't, a lot of people place this on COVID, and this is like, no, this is a long-standing issue that we're finally truly acting behind. And then you can go up to grade 5. For some reason, there's a boost there. Maybe they get a lot of intervention in 4th and 5th grade. Who knows? they get a boost and then they just keep continuing. It never rebounds. And it's important to note that grade 10, which is the next one there, so highest level, we don't know how kids are leaving high school. Grade 10 is the last time we do a measurement of their abilities. So, and there's a lot of data out there to suggest that even college kids that are going off to college are not strong readers. And that I think that's going to even change even more with AI. And like one interesting thing I learned is the SATs have shortened their passages for reading comprehension because the students weren't doing well and they couldn't maintain the attention to read the longer passages. And so I'm like, wow. I would hope we're not lowering the standards in the SATs, right? But that's the reality of kids and their abilities today. So that's a big push of why the READ Act. So this is where we all come in, the successful learner equation. How many of you guys are familiar with the successful learner equation? All right, thank you, Heather. I'm sure others are too. I know their cameras are not up, but it really is placing this I don't what's the right word? Placing this I don't want to say burden, but responsibility on the adults and systems to really be ready for kids. Again, because 95% of kids can read well if given the effective instruction, the right supports and the preparation. Kids can do it. And so it's up to all of us to really provide those environments for kids, but also to partner with families. If we think about it, kids are in school a good chunk, but guess what? They're at home more. They're in their after school programs more. They're in summer programs more than they are actually in their K-5 experiences. So it'll take a system to really change those really low data points for all kids. All right, so early literacy, that's why we're here. That's our goal as early childhood educators, and it includes oral language development, vocabulary and background knowledge, phonological awareness, print awareness, and alphabet knowledge. This is the one that's kind of changed. Before we taught them letter names, and then we taught letter sounds, and now the science is saying, by the time they're 3, 4, do it at the same time, right? Because in Montessori, they don't even teach letter names, they teach letter sounds, right? There's that whole sort of debate there. But in reality, you introduce a letter and a sound at the same time. And I love this quote, literacy is a journey and not a race, right? Kids all have their assets and their strengths that they're bringing with them. And it's our job as educators to acknowledge those and to build upon them. Will some kids lag in some areas? Yeah, but maybe it's just because they haven't had a lot of opportunities to learn those things, right? But we also want to, especially with oral language, is to really be very sensitive to that. And that's the one area in pre-K, if we see delays or we're concerned, that's the area we dig in. All right, so this is just, oh wait, I went too fast. All right. Do you guys see it, or there's this weird thing on my screen? It says inserted URL. Oh, I don't know why it's doing that. But anyways, there is a documentary for if you want high level information about learning to read, and especially at the pre-K level. It's a 1-hour documentary. It's done really, really well. It's called The Reading Brain, or Building the Reading Brain, and it's from PBS in Michigan. And if anybody's familiar with reading researchers, Nell Duke is one of the main producers and voices in that one. It's excellent. I just love it. I watch it every time, and I just feel like renewed in what I do. So it's a good documentary. Anybody else who is interested in that whole K-5 world of about learning to read, here's another 1-hour webinar or documentary, whatever you want to refer to it as, and it's out of the reading universe. And it's how children learn to read. And Margaret Goldberg in here, she's the main voice in here, and she really even gets at the issue of how we came to have such low reading scores, not just in Minnesota, not just in St. Paul Public Schools, but actually across the whole nation. She really digs into it a little bit and really describes what structured literacy is. And again, this is for when we hand off kids into early elementary of what that looks like. And I think that's important. I remember when I was even doing the early literacy project and when I was a teacher, it was always that great mystery. I mean, I knew how I was taught to learn to read, right? I guess I had kids and I supported them at home, but I really didn't know what that instruction looked like. And this webinar really describes what it should look like. So we can also be advocates for our kids and for our school districts and things like that, and really knowing our place in the trajectory. All right. Just as learning to read is a lifelong journey, so is learning how to teach reading. When we're talking about quality instruction, what do programs a lifelong learner, and I'm even to the extent we're all still learning to read. We all come across words we've never seen before or different sort of texts that we haven't really read before, and so we're all using those skills that we learn from such a young age. It's really funny. I read a lot, and sometimes when I talk about it, I've read the word, I've written the word, but I've never said the word. It's really kind of a bizarre place to be in, but it just really reminds you that literacy is the ability to read, write, and talk, right? And those are the skills we want to build in kids. And thus, why we partnered with Cox Campus. So it's kind of interesting. When I first started in this role, I really just did a big sort of Google search. What's out there? What's the new research? What's all that? And I kept coming back to this Cox Campus, right? And I start taking a couple of their courses. At the time, I was supporting a federal grant and working with some different school districts in their preschool programs. And I was always, encouraging the staff to really look at take these courses to support their professional learning. And then I was blessed enough, quite honestly, to be able to go to the NACCE conference, and Cox Campus had a booth. And I talked to the ladies at length, and they said, "No, we work with states to really bring it to your states and streamline the process to really open up these courses for all early childhood educators." And so that's what I did. And primarily what we did is we really worked to make the courses developed approved. Anybody who's done that work, it's not the easiest process, but we did that, and they literally did all the work for me. What do you need? And they really helped me streamline that and get it all uploaded in there and things like that. So really quick, again, Cox Campus is free evidence-based language and literacy professional learning courses. They're asynchronous courses that can be completed incrementally. And I say that because if you take a course, and Heather has, they're in little chunks, right? And so if you have a half hour today, you could sit down in a course for a half hour, and then you leave and you come back, and guess what? You pick up right where you left off. And the chunks are like between 5 and 12 minutes. So they're not like 30 minutes, an hour, things like that. They're really designed for teachers to build on lots of different knowledge. And there's a knowledge test at the end and a certificate of completion. So it really holds you accountable because it's real easy to put something on and walk away, right? But this one really encourages, because there is the knowledge test to get the certificate, it really encourages engagement. There are 23 developed approved early learning courses, and they're not all early literacy. There's some around trauma-informed care, anti-bias. There's 2 Spanish language courses that are done in Spanish. So it's just not early literacy. There's other courses as well. And then there's downloadable instructional resources, and I'm going to talk about just a couple of those, and implementation guides. So if you are a leader in a program, you could set up a groups, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, assign courses to your staff, and many of the courses have implementation guides. So, you would say, hey, get through these many modules over the next week, and then you would have like the implementation guide. So there'd be some guiding questions, some considerations. What does this mean for you as a teacher? What does this mean for our program? And things like that to really support making that learning richer. Because we know just getting professional development is not enough. We have to have the opportunities to practice what we learned and reflect on what we learned and to really so it can inform our practice. All right, so how do you access this? Everybody will have to set up their own Cox Campus membership or to access all the courses. And it's really easy. You go to you go to their website. They don't ask for a whole bunch of information. It's a really simple sort of registration process. And then once you're registered, you theoretically or you do, not even theoretically, you have access to all their courses past what is developed approved. And again, there's courses that go up into elementary. There's courses around coaching. I can't even, there's lots of other different things that are on the Cox Campus site. And then the only caveat is to receive credit in your developed learning record. You'll need to complete the Cox Campus survey. And that's just so we get your develop ID number, we get the certificate, and then so we can go into develop and note that you've completed the course and give you credit. I think in the beginning, I think people were a little confused about that process, but I've noticed Mondays, I'm going to tell you, I get a whole dump of them and then, a few more trickle in on Friday, but we're committed here at MDE to have everybody's developed record updated between 5 and 7 days. And if you work with anybody or if you ever have a problem, please just email me. And I prioritize that and really make sure I remedy the situation because I know people need their develop record updated, at different time points. But these are all the courses. You can see at the top, I did do some different courses into explores, implements, and designs and leads. And then there's all the other courses that are available. One question I've gotten from people is, it says on my certificate 1.5 hours, but it's 2 hours in develop. It's because I recognize that there are those learning resources and they really want you to take those resources and implement them. And so I'm giving credit to people for doing that work as well. Or if you take the test and you have to go back, sometimes you have to do that. I'll admit I had to go back a couple times and listen a little more closely so I could complete the course. And so I really built that into some of the courses. So, and then you have to have that magic 2 hours with develop, to be honest, too. So, but I really took that into consideration when assigning develop credit versus what Cox Campus says it will take to complete the course. So is there any questions? I've been talking a lot.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but I will pop in and just share a little bit about my experience when I took the classes. One thing that I really liked about the Cox Campus courses is you can't just skip through the content. You do have to listen to it all. And then you get to the quiz. And if you don't get the quiz right, you go back and try again. And so I really appreciate that. Not all learning platforms make sure that you do, absorb the content. And I listen to audiobooks a lot and I listen to them at a faster speed, and you can speed up the videos if you are used to processing a little faster. And I also, in my defense, I did take a class that is very similar to one that I've trained on before. So I knew most of the content. So I didn't necessarily have to listen all that closely, but like I said, I really appreciate the fact that they did take care to make sure that everyone is getting all of the content and you can't just skip through it to get the credit. And Brittany mentioned in the chat too that she really liked the format and it was easy to use.
Yeah, that's one thing I really liked about it. Because I've taken a lot of asynchronous stuff or gone to webinars, and sometimes you're not motivated to complete it. You make it just through a little bit, or you do that whole speeding through thing. But this is really just an opportunity, to just slow down and to take in the content and refresh. And like I said, being at this for a long time and being a professional trainer, there's a number of the courses I was like, I like that. Wow, I didn't think of it like that before. Or it renewed what I knew. And so that's all really good because we all know when we're in room full of kids, sometimes what we know even gets forgotten, right? So these are just really good opportunities to learn new information or just to strengthen what we know. All right, so I mentioned resources. So this is just one of the courses, and this is the ecosystem course. So if you go to the website, you get to the course, you'll see it top across the ribbon, you'll see resources and you click it, and there's going to be what resources are associated with the course. And so for this one, it says a closer look at the essential ecosystem elements. There's a classroom language plan template. So again, there's a lot of resources to support implementation in the classroom. And so this is just what that looks like. And I'm going to just show you a little bit more. So one that I'm kind of pulling up is within the ecosystem course. Rollins has kind of created their own ESIPs, I guess one could say, if we use Minnesota terminology, that really has learning objectives, developmental tracking, but then also what they do is that they align it to their courses. So if you look at the cross, they have the developmental goal, and then which courses would they recommend for people to take to really understand it and to strengthen their practice, or how would this look in my classroom? I say it's similar to ESIPs, and I did check in with our ECSE partners. I did check in with others, and I said, can we cross-check these a little bit? And basically, what they said is they're very similar, but they just dive in a little deeper. So ESIPs is not every learning objective for kids, right? It does a good job of doing a lot of it, but this one just digs in a little bit more deeper to language, literacy, and communication. So that's the focus. So it's just a little bit more detailed. And it aligns. And some of them I was like, oh, is this aligned? And I talked to one of my colleagues who's an SLP. She goes, oh, 100%. They just give more detail. So this is just more detail around language, literacy, and communication as a tool. Again, a tool, a resource to support implementation. So this is from the ecosystem approach, and it's the uh, Rollins Expected Childhood Outcomes in Language and Literacy. So it's a good resource to have. All right. This is, I will say, the most popular course. It's Build My Brain. And this one actually has an implementation guide to go with it. And like I said, not all courses have implementation guides, but many of them do. And I would recommend that it's used alongside the course. So if you're doing it, if you want to check in even more than what's available online, it has some guiding questions. It really just really gets you thinking more about the content and what it means for you as an educator and what it means for the program you serve. Or if you're a leader of your program, which I think many of you are, it would really be good to like for instance, maybe you have your professional development day and you're going to utilize two of Cox Campus's courses. Well, this one is an hour and a half theoretically, but then you could use that extra half hour to actually go through the implementation guide with your staff to really think about what does this mean for our program? What does this mean for your classrooms and things like that. All right, and there's many, many more. I could just sit here and talk all day about all the different ones, but I'll talk a little bit more what our plans at MDE are for those resources. All right, so I thought I'd share a little bit of the data because oh, go ahead, Heather.
There is a question in the chat about, is there a way to easily filter in Develop to find the Cox Campus courses?
You know what? I didn't take somebody's advice, but there is a flyer. So if you go to MDE and you go to early education and you will see professional development, and then it says Cox Campus, there's a flyer and it lists all the courses. And I can also share that same flyer with Heather. I don't know if you guys have a follow-up email. I'm going to share this PowerPoint, and I can share that flyer as well that lists all the courses for you. So yeah, good question. Yes, somebody told me I needed to put Cox Campus in the front, and for some reason when I loaded it in there, I didn't do that. So that's my era that I learned in doing this work. And then I found out to go back, it would mean they would all come down from, I think, Heather, momentarily while they got reapproved and things like that. So I will share that flyer widely so people know. Or you can search me, Lucy Arias. I'm the trainer. Those are the only courses that I have. So if you search for trainer, those are the only courses I have in this system. So that would be another way to do it as well. All right, so here's some data. My work primarily impacts families and children living where? And I really like this. This is one of the things I had in mind. I know in the metro area, access to in-person trainings and things like that is a lot more um, convenient, quite honestly, right? The drives aren't as far, that there's multiple times for different trainings and things like that. And so I really was thinking of early educators outside of the metro, right? So if you look at this data, obviously the majority come from the metro. Obviously, the majority of providers are in the metro. But if you look about it, quite honestly, the majority of people who've completed this courses are from outstate. And then this other, I looked at the other of what they wrote in, and really they just got in more detail. They shared their county or their city, and I scanned through them and like, oh, they're still all out state. So the majority of the providers who are taking this course are from Greater Minnesota, and that was kind of my intent as well in forming this partnership. So this was a good thing for me. I felt good about that, and really glad that people are finding the courses and accessing them and really finding value with them. So part of the survey is I asked teachers, how do you feel about these courses? And 97% felt content was valuable and helpful. That's a good big thumbs up. 93% believe information learned will strengthen their practice. 85% will apply what they learned in their roles, and 84% plan on completing another Cox campus course. So if anybody hasn't taken a course, your colleagues in the world, really gave some high reviews to these courses. All right. So like I said, 205 educators have requested Cox Campus courses be applied to the developed learning. So there are more people who've completed them. They just didn't need developed credit. And when I ran the data, I just selected the people who needed the developed credit. So there's others. I think it's like 300 who have completed the survey, but they didn't need credit. So I didn't necessarily include them. But then also, I know Head Starts don't always need developed credit. So I know the Head Start organizations have been utilizing them. I made them applicable. I approved them for some READ Act training for paraprofessionals. So there's other pockets of educators around the state that are also accessing. Educators have taken all 23 courses. So I have data on every single course. And then I listed for you guys the top 5 courses that have been completed thus far. So like I said before, Build My Brain, that's the one that most people are accessing. And then Talk With Me, Baby Early Care and Learning, Monitoring Children's Progress in Language and Literacy, Meaningful Conversations, and then an ecosystem approach, developing foundation for rating in early years. Oh, that's a mouthful too. So there's that. So what is next? So what I'm going to be planning, and not, I think maybe in the next couple months, I am going to, one, for people who've taken, so once I get to a certain level of people completing a course, I can email them all, right? I have their developed credit. I can email them and say, hey, I'm going to do some extended learning on this material and offer them a 2-hour, probably synchronous course, building off even implementation guides or other research or other sort of ways that they can implement it into their classroom. In addition, selecting probably the ecosystem course, or I haven't quite decided, but doing a groups with people to really engage people more explicitly, I guess you could say, in the content, to really, I will say for my benefit, just to learn from educators. Where are they at? What other sort of resources do they need? How can I support this learning and things like that? So that's one thing I plan on doing. I'm also going to look at the courses more intently and really create pathways. So if you add up all the hours of learning, 23 courses, it's like 68 hours of professional learning. Really, what would be a good pathway for different educators? So I'm going to dig into a little bit more of that and provide that to leaders as well. And then I'm just going to continue to promote. People are liking the courses. They find them easy and useful, really letting more and more individuals know about these courses so they can access them. because that's the goal too, ongoing professional learning, right? That makes us all better at what we do. All right, so that's my presentation for today. I'm open to any questions or comments. And a big thank you. And again, if there's any questions or you're having issues, you take a course and something's not quite right, email me. And in addition, if you email Cox Campus, if they can't answer the question, they email me. They're like, Lucy, what should we do with this? And then, we brainstorm or I know the answer right away. And so we work together as well in making sure that the courses are accessible and really support people in utilizing them. So I will stop sharing, and if there's any questions or comments, I'm here. Um, there's no bad question. I love questions.
Thank you so much. As folks are taking the opportunity to just let this sink in a little bit, reach out to us. And if you lose Lucy's contact information, we can certainly get you in touch with her as well. And like I said, I will get the handout out to everyone. That is on the call, and I'm hoping to find a way to link it into our recording as well, if nothing else. If you're watching this recording and it is not attached, reach out to James Setta or myself. Our contact information is on the Child Care Aware website, and we can get that information over to you. So I see we've got several folks from the Child Care Aware system on here, as well as some other folks around the state. So I will pause for questions.
I did have one question from a larger childcare program, and they said, well, we are going to assign these courses to our staff, and then, the whole process of they need to download their certificate, they need to complete the survey. Is there a better way that we could do that? And so for this larger system, I said, yeah, if you have 15 teachers who completed one course, or you have 7 who completed one course, yes, they can all complete the survey. I love the data. I love the feedback. But if the leader of that program wants to have their staff provide them the certificate, and if you want to bulk them to me, I'm okay with that. I would just need, a roster of their name and their develop ID and then the corresponding certificate. So that was to them, they felt much more doable to ensure that that whole process happens. So I'm open to that because either because every time a survey is completed, I get an email letting me know a survey was completed, or I get an email from a director with a list and, those certificates attached. Either or works for me. So I just would open that up as people. I don't have it written anywhere. I had a couple of emails from directors and, we talked it through, and I said, no, that'll work.
Yeah,
So
that's a wonderful option. Thank you. I see
mhm.
some a note in the chat too about appreciation for that response, because sometimes people avoid things if there's too many hoops to jump through. So thank
Mhm.
you for offering to make that easier.
Heather, you said you'd send us information, correct?
Yes.
I just have a program that was asking some PD questions, and I think this will be great for them. So I want to get it out to them. So
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. You're welcome.
Oh, here's another question I got. When you register for Cox Campus, it says use your professional email. That's ideal. I don't know why they want that, but that's ideal. But if you're using your own Hotmail, your own Gmail, or your own Yahoo, that doesn't disqualify you from accessing the courses. It's just a recommendation from Cox Campus.
Does it need to match the email that's on your develop account?
It helps me if if the number isn't matching, like, you know what because
Yep.
sometimes people type in the wrong develop ID. And so if the email doesn't come up in the develop system and then the ID isn't right, then it's really hard for me to figure it out. Because people don't even write some people have there's a lot of, I forget, what is it, Krista Anderson's, or that's just a made up one, and none of those match. And I had Krista Anderson, then I had 5 people. And it was like none of it matched. And I was like, ugh. So she did finally get back to me. Why isn't this not on my develop credit? And I said, well, it's
So
because none
glad
of
you
these
asked.
matches. So, and thank you for emailing me, and I will get that fixed for you today. So, and we worked it out. So, yes.
Wonderful.
And it wasn't Kristen Anderson. I'm just going to put that out there, but it was a more common name. And I was like, whoa, I don't know what to do with that. And then sometimes people don't use full names and all sorts of stuff. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. This has been so wonderful. I don't see any other questions coming up in the chat or anybody coming off mute. So we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. Thank you again, Lucy, so much for coming and sharing the details of this program with everyone. And we'll get this up on our website so other people can listen as they have time. And like I said, reach out to myself, Heather Sharmoli, Jamesetta Diggs, or Lucy with any questions. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Now, I think, yeah, Lucy hopped out, but